from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
The president threatening to pull out of NAFTA.
Personally, I don't think we can make a deal.
On the Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour.
I'm Betsy Gibbon. We're in the #1 corn producing state, but will dry conditions impact the corn yield here?
And we're also in the #2 corn producing state. How did an extended period of dry weather impact yields here in Illinois? We'll have that from our crop tour coverage on AgDay.
In agribusiness, is it a good buy for feed?
Excellent opportunity now. We are at a seasonal time period. I think we're still modeling the 93 market.
And an eclipse experience from the family dairy in Missouri.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clint Griffiths, fresh off the Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour. We'll check in on Tyne Morgan and Betsy Gibbon in just a moment, but first, ominous words from the president over NAFTA.
Personally, I don't think we can make a deal because we have been so badly taken advantage of.
While speaking to an assembly of his supporters in Phoenix, President Trump saying Canada and Mexico both got better deals than the U.S. in the North American Free Trade Agreement. In April, the president threatened to sign an executive order to withdraw the U.S. from NAFTA. A week later, the president took a course change and announced a renegotiation with the trading partners. Those negotiations started last week.
So I think we'll end up probably terminating NAFTA at some point. Okay, probably. But I told you from the first day, we will renegotiate NAFTA or we will terminate NAFTA. I personally don't think you can make a deal without a termination, but we're going to see what happens, okay? You're in good hands, I can tell you.
The first round of talks ended last weekend. The next round will be in Mexico, followed by a trip to Canada at the end of the month. The biggest sticking point appears to be over a section of the agreement that pertains to trade dispute settlements. NAFTA isn't the only trade pact up in the air for the U.S. South Korea and U.S. trade officials are struggling to reach an agreement on whether to reopen talks on a new bilateral free trade agreement. The U.S. has requested for renegotiations of the trade deal that went into effect 5 years ago with South Korea. U.S. Trade Rep Robert Lighthizer says the U.S. trade deficit with South Korea has more than doubled to $27 billion just last year. The meeting ended without a decision on the next steps for possible revisions.
Coverage of the 2017 Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour is brought to you by DuPont Pioneer, with you from the word go.
The Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour heads into its last day of crop sampling. Teams of scouts from the eastern and western Corn Belt are both in Iowa this morning, headed toward Minnesota. Now, from pockets of drought in the west to extreme variability in the east. This is what I saw as I traveled from Ohio through Indiana this week. Plenty of good-looking fields from the road, but from above, the marks of a challenging planting season remain. Acres upon acres of replant, leaving corn and soybeans behind in maturity. Now, looking at day 2 results, Indiana's average corn yield hit 171 bushels an acre. Pro Farmer's 3-year average for the same Indiana district, 167 bushels to the acre. The pod count for soybeans come in at just under 1,200 bean pods in a 3 by 3 foot square. Now that's similar to the 3-year average, but conditions are drier than a year ago. Nebraska's average corn yield registering at 165 bushels to the acre. That's 3 bushels higher than the 3-year average. And pod counts are just over 1,100 per square. Tyne Morgan took over for me on the second half of the eastern leg. She spent Wednesday with scouts in Illinois. Now, USDA is expecting corn yields at 188 bushels to the acre, soybeans at 58, both below 2016. Tyne, what are scouts seeing, and are they disappointed in those yields?
Yeah, Clinton, disappointed would be a good description. It's a word I've heard often here on Crop Tour. And scouts tell me while the corn isn't a disaster this year, it's not that great. But they're really disappointed in the soybean crop.
Pod count really doesn't really look like much.
From bountiful beans in 2016,
tape measure,
scouts just aren't seeing the same on this year's route.
Soybeans have been very low. I mean, just in District 4 when we came in through this morning, I think we dropped about 37% in pod count year on year.
What we notice the most is that the pods on the lower part of the plant are just not there.
But for local farmers,
these plants are loaded.
They're hopeful the crop can finish strong.
I have some fields that had more rain last night than they've had all summer long.
Rains that may not be too late for some of the later maturity beans.
Right now, I mean, I'm not saying we couldn't be out of, maybe 5 to 10 bushel down from where we were last year, but we get another rain, we could be right there with where we were last year, I think, in some scenarios.
While the verdict is still out on soybean yields, both scouts and farmers agree on one thing.
There's a fairly decent sized tip back.
Corn yields are definitely down in Illinois.
We had heard yesterday that one of the independents had done a survey and they estimated that county at 190. We had trouble finding a field over 175. We're talking corn here. That's all 225 dirt.
I think a good yield here in southeast McLean County is going to be 200 bushel, 190 to 200.
And near Champaign, outlooks also point to yields down 15% from last year.
Overall, I would say we're still down from last year. I would say 30 to 40 bushel in a lot of scenarios.
While grain fill is partially to blame,
Around here you're going to find some kind of tip back.
it's the number of ears dragging down yields.
But the problem that we have is that the ears are just not there as far as corn. So when you look at soybeans or you look at corn, the fact of the matter is whether it's pods in soybeans or ears in corn, the numbers are just not there.
An area farmers say a rough start to planting combined with dryness in June and July is also to blame.
This year we didn't have that hot of temperature, but it was just a shortage of moisture.
But even with yields lagging last year, Myers says it's not enough to provide a bullish story in the corn market right now.
The problem is, in my opinion, is that you really need to get the yield below 160 before it makes a difference on a national average. And the problem with that is, even though I haven't seen Iowa, I don't see enough bad corn to say, yeah, we can get that yield down below 160.
Well, now scouts leave Illinois and head into eastern Iowa. So how good or how bad is that crop in eastern Iowa, considering some areas are seeing dryness? We'll answer that question as our crop tour coverage continues tomorrow on Ag Day. Reporting from Illinois, I'm Tyne Morgan.
All right, thanks, Tyne. Now, almost 2/3 of Iowa is in an abnormal drought on the U.S. Drought Monitor, and just under half of the state rated severe. Betsy Gibbons in the west central part of that state where drought is clearly evident. Betsy?
For Montgomery County farmer Roger Servine, this growing season is described in a few words.
It's pretty dry.
Servine says the rains shut off in June and have not turned on much.
The challenges that we've had, though, have been since the last part of June and then through July, that we didn't get any rain. Right now it's the 22nd of August, and last Monday was the first good rain we'd had in that month.
Lack of rain is showing up in his crops.
We've got a fair amount of corn that's burned up from the bottom up to the ears. Ear tip back is quite prevalent on even our best soils and best hybrids.
Yet the scouts say the route we are on through Harrison and Monona counties are still southwest of the drought-stricken areas, so they are not too surprised with the corn yield samples.
Some of the results we've seen don't really surprise me too much, not being in the drought area.
16, 226.
With dryland corn mostly in the 200 ballpark. Yet the beans may be more of a problem.
The variability in the beans is astonishing to me.
Flat pod again, really.
And we're seeing flat pods all the way down the plant to the bottom, which isn't, to my knowledge, very normal.
Ehlers wonders if some flat pods will even fill and produce a bean.
I think the beans would be in big trouble with an early frost.
It's something Servine is seeing in his area as well.
But they're all flat. Nothing, we didn't have any water to fill them.
Not the year some Iowa farmers wanted.
It's not going to be above average. It'll probably be some below for our APHs.
And even though USDA expects Iowa to produce a yield of 188, farmers like Ehlers say we may not know if the drought in the west will impact Iowa's corn yield until the combines roll. Reporting in west central Iowa, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Mike Hoffman getting in on the crop tour. He has some pictures in today's crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. There are all kinds of photos and comments from the crop tour. If you're following it on Twitter, hashtag FJTour17. Chip Flory's daughter, Emily, posted this photo from western Iowa. She says, while it looks like an even, clean soybean field, there's evidence of drought. And the pod count was only 900 in a 3-by-3 foot square. She says soybean blooms were dried up. And AgriTalk's Mike Adams put up this photo from Osceola County, Iowa. The crop is severely lodged. The yield potential was 210 bushels an acre. And taking a look at the weather map today, you can see a couple of systems affecting the lower 48, and we do have a tropical storm Harvey, which we'll talk about. We'll have your forecast for that and the rest of the country coming up. But first, here are some hometown temps.
DuPont Pioneer is auctioning off a Timpty Super Hopper grain trailer, and all proceeds benefit the FFA. Register to bid at pioneer.com/chrome. That's pioneer.com/QROME.
All right, when we come back, we'll flip the conversation from the grain farmer's side to the grain buyer side of the equation. And later, we're spending time with the cows for a once-in-a-lifetime event.
Join Market Rally host Chip Flory live from the Ravo AgriFinance booth at this year's Farm Progress Show, August 29th through the 31st.
In agribusiness, markets paying attention to the crop tour and several other dynamics on Wednesday. Let's get those details from the Florida CME.
Hi, it's been an interesting day in the grain markets with soybeans and soybean oil trading higher. Soybean oil really the leader to the upside over the course of the day today, with news overnight that the Commerce Department has moved to restrict the imports of biofuels from Argentina and from Indonesia. That due, of course, to ideas that they are dumping at very, very cheap prices into our market. Corn and wheat have also been trading lower on the course of the day, mostly on speculative selling. The Farm Journal Crop Tour has been finding some very mixed results as it moves through the state of Illinois, and better results as it moves through the state of Iowa. Cattle and hogs trading lower over the course of the day. There's been very little trade in the livestock markets, at least in the cattle markets here. As we start to get the auction markets underway, the electronic fed cattle exchange was already passed, and no cattle traded at that. So there's fears that we may see somewhat weaker prices as we move forward. Thanks very much. This is Jack Scoville, Vice President of Price Futures Group, here on the CME Group floor with some comments for the markets.
Now, we focused a lot on prices for grain growers this week, but what does this year's yield potential mean for livestock feeders? Tyne Morgan's back.
Here now with Bob Utterback of Utterback Marketing. Bob, with prices today, you know, we thought after this August report that we would get maybe bullish rhetoric and it would move prices higher. It hasn't. Bad news for the grain growers, but what about for feed buyers? What's your advice for them?
Excellent opportunity now. We are at a seasonal time period. I think we're still modeling the 93 market, was late August, early September. Once we get into the September supply-demand report, we will confirm lower yields, and it will progress through the December. And as the bin door shuts, I think the market will seasonally bounce. But the real strength will be next summer. So it's time now to start getting your feed buying, get your feed locked up on wide basis, and buy the front end. You don't want to buy the deferred and buy the carry. You want to buy the front end D's corn, and my preference is to buy an in-the-money call so that if I'm a little early, I can roll the call down. But essentially start accumulating some feed needs. It's time now to get in the market and get those locked up. In reference to corn, bean is not as clear cut. If USDA is right at 49 bushel plus, beans are going to have a hard time, but I would want to be the same size structurally buying beans.
Real quick, livestock prices, you know, even though we've seen red on the board for grains, we're seeing red on the board for a lot of livestock too. I mean, are we kind of just, is this seasonal right now, or really what's going on?
I think we're in the seasonal. It's kind of the harvest is out in the next field, and it's kind of getting kind of late. I think the hog still has more downside weakness. If you were still open on your hogs for the December time period, I really think there's still some real weakness. Everybody's been betting on these packers coming online that's going to rally the market. I said it back in March. I didn't think it was going to bullish, and I sold the market into this. I'm very comfortable being hedged right now, and I think we'll probably got another $5 downside risk.
All right, Bob, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Stay with us. We'll have a check of weather after the break.
To talk with Bob one-on-one, call Utterback Marketing Services, toll free at 800-832-1488.
Welcome back to AgDay. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, I think a lot of folks that grow cotton down in the South, especially Texas, are watching this tropical storm as it develops.
And there are still some questions. National Hurricane Center taking it right into cotton country in Texas and eventually eastward. Our model's a little different, as we'll show you. But first, let's check things out a little farther north. You can see kind of a stationary front along the Gulf Coast. That'll keep a lot of the moisture from coming farther north. Two areas of high pressure building southward, weak storm system moving more northward and just barely across the middle of the country. So while you might think, oh, this is going to spread across the Great Lakes, no, it doesn't look that way. It looks like it's going to stay over the plain states for at least the next couple of days. As we head through tomorrow night, then you can see most of the lower 48 dry, but along this warm front from Iowa into parts of the north central plains like South Dakota, Nebraska, we are looking at some scattered showers and thunderstorms, and there will be some activity down along the Gulf Coast. Now here's where our computer model takes Tropical Storm Harvey at that point, right south of McAllen, Texas, and taking it northwestward from there. The National Hurricane Center using different models than ours, taking it up into central Texas and then curving it to the east, heading eastward along the Gulf Coast. Now that would be bad news for the cotton crop in a lot of that area. You don't need rain right now when you're trying to harvest. So something we'll have to watch. Our model again taking it into northern Mexico. Let's take a look at the precipitation estimate over the past 24 hours. You can see some areas, a few spots, northern plains, eastern portions of the Carolinas and Virginia getting a little moisture, in some spots across Texas into the southwest. Adding in the next 36 hours, you can see our model adds a lot in South Florida, a little bit scattered through Texas, and then a whole bunch, like a foot or more, south of McAllen into northern Mexico. Again, if that comes farther north, though, that 6 to 10 inches, 12 inches of rain could move into southeastern portions of Texas, so something we'll be watching. Take a look at temperatures this afternoon. Boy, is it cool for this time of the year. Here we are in late August. We're talking highs in the 60s and low 70s all across the Great Lakes, many parts of the Northeast. The heat's really been shoved all the way to the south of that stationary front, and you can see lows tonight. Still pretty muggy down along the Gulf Coast, but farther north, 40s and 50s across the Great Lakes for low temperatures. And then tomorrow afternoon, we're looking at the 80s, kind of staying to the south again with 60s and 70s still dominating farther north. That's all because of the jet stream. You can see the first trough kind of moving through. That does lessen its influence, but look, more energy diving in as we head into next week. That's going to keep the trough in the east and the ridge out west, a similar pattern to much of the summer. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Going to Elko, Nevada, first of all, partly sunny and rather warm today, high of 89 degrees. Vandalia, Illinois, a good deal of sunshine and comfortable, high 79. And Hartford, Connecticut, mostly sunny and very comfortable, high around 80 degrees.
Up next, we've got our Drovers TV report, and we're headed for Missouri, where this family farm hosting some heavenly viewing. And news from our partners at Drovers, American consumers say they're less willing to pay for all meats than they were a month ago. That assessment is based on Oklahoma State University's Food Demand Survey. OSU's survey tracks consumer sentiment based on safety, quality, and price of food, with special attention paid to meat demand. Now, the monthly survey of 1,000 consumers found a 6% decline in demand for steak and a 4% decline in demand for hamburger.
Consumers indicated they expect beef prices to remain relatively unchanged and chicken and pork prices to increase slightly compared to a month ago. Consumers said they plan to buy less beef and chicken and more pork compared to last month. Meanwhile, plans to eat out increased slightly compared to the previous month.
Henderson says the National Beef Retail Activity Index was also lower last week. It's 8% below year-ago levels. However, these trends in August retail beef typically follow seasonal declines. Beef retail activity rebounds around Labor Day and is notably higher in October. All right, when we come back, an eclipse event straight from the farm.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit Kubota.com today.
The eclipse may be over, but the buzz around the celestial event continues as many rural areas got in on the fun. Chateau Milk Company in Osborne, Missouri opened the farm to up to 350 cars, which was roughly about 2,000 people, to come watch the eclipse. The owners say it was a great opportunity to showcase the dairy, the farm, and have fun around a really unique event. Clouds and a bit of wet weather didn't dampen spirits, though.
And then it gradually moved through cloud covering to being in totality, which got extraordinarily dark, much darker than I thought it was going to get, and we had a break just in time to see the perfect totality.
The farm even made up T-shirts and sold black milk, cookies and cream flavored, ahead of the event. Now they ended up with visitors from across the region and even several countries. Looked like a pretty good time. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. For Tyne, Betsy, and Mike, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.
AgDay is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest lasting pickups.